This video is intended for schools and colleges delivering BTEC qualifications at level 3 and above. In this video I'm going to outline some potential collaboration opportunities between the Engineers Academy and other academic institutions. So if you do represent a school or college delivering BTEC qualifications, then please continue listening for more information. Before I go into detail about these collaboration opportunities, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my own background in the hope that this will add some credibility to the offerings that we may be speaking about later on. My name's Andrew Smith and I'm the founder of the Engineers Academy. My own academic background is in mechanical engineering and I have a BEng Honours degree and a PhD in the subject which I obtained from Brunel University back in 2006. More recently, I've completed a postgraduate certificate in education and have also secured qualified teacher status for teaching both in secondary schools and in the further education sector. In terms of my own teaching profile, I've consistently been graded as a grade 1 and a grade 2 teacher. I've actually been graded as outstanding on 3 separate occasions. In terms of the provisions that I have experience teaching across, I have taught right through from level 1 all the way through to level 5, although more recently my teaching has been focused on level 4 and level 5 subjects. Most of my more recent teaching has been in subjects such as thermodynamics and heat transfer and combustion, which is more closely linked to what I was doing during my PhD. I've also held the role of Innovation Improvement Practitioner, which is similar to the old subject learning coaches. However, this role was specifically geared towards bringing technology into the classroom. And I'm sure you're going to identify some overlap between that idea of bringing technology into the classroom and some of the things that I'm going to share with you later on in this video. Perhaps more notably is my programme leadership experience. In the college where I was previously employed, I was responsible for looking after the higher education provision. And at the time when I resigned from that post, we actually had 411 learners on HE programmes, including HNCs, HNDs and foundation degrees. I think what makes that significant is that 4 years prior to that, we only had 107 learners. So the growth over that 4-year period was significant. And although I wasn't wholly responsible for that growth, I was instrumental in the introduction of a number of new programmes, things such as an HND top-up and also an evening HNC offer. Now for me, the real reason behind that growth was because we learned to be flexible. We learned to be flexible with delivery models, we learned to be flexible with the type of curriculum that we were delivering, and we became a lot more employer focused. So in this video today I want to tell you a little bit more about the Engineers Academy and how hopefully the Engineers Academy can collaborate with your institution. So just to provide a very brief company outline, the Engineers Academy offers courses with full online delivery and assessment. What we're looking to do here is provide distance learning courses that are unrivaled in the industry. Now to date we have some level 3 courses that have been developed. As you may be aware, the new RQF BTEC Level 3 Nationals include a mandatory unit called Engineering Principles, and from colleges that I've spoken with, it's evident that this is causing a number of challenges. One of the main challenges is because the unit contains a lot of technical content from both the maths, mechanical and electrical disciplines, so it's actually a unit that's very difficult for one individual tutor to teach. Another thing that's presenting a challenge here is the sheer volume of content that needs to be covered for that unit. And perhaps the biggest challenge for colleges and for students alike is that this unit is actually being assessed by an exam. And this is something that potentially makes students as well as colleges a little bit uncomfortable. So one of the courses that we've developed is a full online preparation and revision course for this unit. It covers all of the content from all of the disciplines. There's end of outcome tests and there's mock exams. So there's a huge amount of resource there that first of all could be used within the classroom setting, but also could be used for structured revision for students. The other thing that we've developed is some level 3 bridging courses. Now the ethos behind the Engineers Academy is to ensure that any learners that are progressing into HE have a solid background and a solid working knowledge of the level 3 content. Level 3 qualifications obtained from different institutions are not necessarily all equal, and we want to make sure that every student entering an HE programme really has a good grasp of these level 3 concepts. Alongside that, one of our real target markets is individuals who have been perhaps working for a number of years and now want to access HE after a long period of time outside of education. These bridging units have been developed to ensure that their knowledge is where it needs to be in order to back up their application in terms of their industrial experience and industrial relevance. Ideally what we're looking for is a college in each region who will endorse those bridging units and accept students onto their HE programs once they've acquired a certificate of completion from an Engineers Academy bridging course. And that's something that we're very much open to talking to colleges and providers about. This provides a win-win situation because this will help us to develop credibility with our bridging units, and it will also potentially provide students onto HE programs for our partnering colleges. Now going forward, the Engineers Academy intends to offer online HNCs, HNDs and eventually degree programs. And again, this offers some collaboration opportunities. Rather than becoming an approved centre and competing with colleges, what we actually want to do is work with colleges and deliver these qualifications as a partner to our academic institutions. This offers a number of different benefits for the student. They'll be able to access student loans. And for the colleges, it means that there's access to additional funding such as hefty funding. So I guess what we're looking for in a broader context is colleges that will endorse our bridging courses and take students onto their day release HNC programs where that individual is able to get day release from their employer. And in the instances where someone has done the bridging units and isn't able to access day release courses, we'd like to introduce them to our online HNCs, which will deliver as a partner for those colleges. Now this leads us on to the vision of the Engineers Academy. We aim to be the leading provider of online HE for engineering. And in fact, I'd just like to share our vision statement with you. Our vision is to provide world-class engineering education that exceeds the expectations of our students, academic institutions and partner companies alike. To offer the flexibility that allows students to study anytime, anywhere and in a timescale that suits their individual needs. And finally, to remove the barriers that prevent individuals from achieving their true academic potential. And that is really where our target market lies, amongst individuals who at the moment can't access HE programs because they're not entitled to day release, or they don't have the funding available to pay for these courses from an independent training provider. So now I'd just like to tell you a little bit about the platform, the resources, just so you can see how this differs from other distance learning offers. One of the things that we have structured our content around is bite-sized video tutorials. One of the things that was important to us from the start was to have lessons that could be accessed in short periods of time. So say for example a student has 45 minutes to study. We want them to be able to watch a short video, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, learn how to apply some concepts to a given problem, and then go on and solve some problems for themselves. So in that 45-minute period, they've actually completed a full learning cycle. They've seen how a problem's been solved, and hopefully they've solved some problems for themselves. The other thing that we've tried to replicate is the classroom experience. So all of our video tutorials are delivered in a style that's consistent with what you would get in a classroom setting. We use different tutors for our mechanical videos and for our electrical videos, so what we're really trying to do is create a much more personable approach. And that's something that can definitely be lost if the resources are provided in text format, for example. So in addition to the video tutorials on the study platform, the students will be able to find all of their supporting resources, whether it be equation sheets, graph paper, all of the things that they need to complete the practice questions are accessible on the platform. It's a one-stop shop for everything that they need. Now this is where we really see that we differ from other providers. We have self-assessment practice questions, and these can also be used for assessments and assignments. And these self-assessment practice questions include coding, so this means that every time a student revisits a question, the question is unique. And I'll just demonstrate this with an example. So on the left-hand side of the screen here, we see a typical question, and this is around the resolution of forces. So we have 4 forces acting on an object, and the purpose of this question is to get the learner to calculate the magnitude and direction of the resultant force. But under the diagram there, we see some forces and some angles. If the learner was to revisit the question, those forces and angles would change. What this also means is if you're utilising these resources in the classroom and 2 learners are sat together, no 2 learners will be working on an identical question. And what this means is that the learner needs to develop an understanding of the methods used to solve the problem rather than just memorising the solutions. It's a much more developmental approach. Now, what we've also done is we've structured questions so that the learner can check that their working stages are accurate. So in this example here, the first part of the question asks them to calculate the sum of the x components of the 4 forces, and then they would be asked to calculate the sum of the y components and so on. It means that what they can do is they can check their answer before they move on to the next stage of the problem. If they input the answer incorrectly, then they'll receive a hint. So here, for example, we see an incorrect answer inputted for the sum of the x components, and the hint reads, remember that the sum of the x components runs horizontally. The student's then gone on and recalculated the sum of the x components, and it indicates that their answer is correct. They would then go on to calculate the y components, the magnitude of the resultant and the direction of the resultant, but at each intermediate stage they would be able to check that their answers were correct. Now, the other thing that this lends itself to is differentiation, and I wrote this example as part of an article that I was preparing, so I thought that I would share it with you here. Now, just setting the scene for you here, I want you to imagine that these resources are being used within a classroom and the learner's being asked to calculate resultant forces as in the example on the previous page. So we have a mixed ability class of 20 learners and they're all studying this unit together, or this topic. As the students arrive to a lesson, they're instructed to log onto the Engineers Academy study platform. The teacher directs the students to lessons on the topic of calculating resultant forces. So the students who are already comfortable applying trigonometry watch the video tutorial for the resolution of 3 force systems and begin working through the practice questions. The questions are structured such that the students are able to check if they're progressing correctly. For example, they will calculate the sum of the x components and input their answer, receiving notification that it's correct, before moving on to calculating the sum of the y components. And that's exactly what we saw on the previous slide. It then goes on to say, if they make mistakes or are unsure of the next steps, then they refer back to the video tutorials or go back to the lesson on calculating the resultant of 2 forces. They're able to continue working independently, irrespective of their ability. So what we've mentioned there is the higher end students who are capable of working independently. But we haven't forgotten about the other students that require more support. However, some students are not comfortable applying trigonometry. They begin watching the tutorials for calculating the resultant of 2 forces, which directs them back to earlier lessons on Pythagoras' theorem and trigonometry. They spend the lesson revisiting these topics, and by the end of the session have been able to use trigonometry to find the x and y components of a single force. Now, what we've demonstrated there is if these resources are being used in the classroom, or if they're being used by someone independently as they're working through these tutorials at home, there's plenty of support resources there, but there's also some stretch and challenge. We've tried to ensure that all learners are going to be capable of achieving their potential. And it's very much self-guided learning, which is exactly what we was hoping to achieve. So next I'd just like to talk briefly about some of the progress monitoring mechanisms and weekly reporting schedules that we have in place. We've set the platform up so that learners who are enrolled on programs are going to receive a weekly report. So at 5 PM on a Friday, they're going to receive a report similar to this format, where it will specify the unit that they're working on, it will specify how much progress they've made in the previous week, and then it will specify how much progress they've made overall. Now this is great for the learner because it encourages them to stay on track. They're going to want to make progress each week, and they're going to want to see that progress compound to their overall progress. These templates also include a percentage score for all of the sets of practice questions they've completed. This means they can identify their strengths and weaknesses and revisit topics that they're not doing so well on. Now, secondary to this, we've also set up a reporting schedule for a mentor or a line manager or an individual that has a cluster of learners. So let's say, for example, I'm an employer and I have 10 learners enrolled on an Engineers Academy programme. At 5 PM on a Friday, I also receive a report. And in that report, I have a list of my 10 learners and I have the breakdown of how much progress each of those learners have made in the previous week and also how much progress each of those learners has made overall on the programme. That report could also be received by an academic mentor. It could also be received by a head of department. We have complete control over who these reports are actually sent to. And this is really an ideal way of keeping on top of possible at-risk learners or people who aren't engaging with the programmes that they're enrolled onto. Now finally, and again I'll keep this very brief, we also have facilities for assessors, mentors and IVs to access the platform to review learner work and to review learner progress. So when it comes to things like standard verifier visits, what we'll be able to do very easily is grant them access to the platform so that they can access the types of information that they need during their visit. Now, I appreciate that we've covered quite a lot there, so what I wanted to do was just provide a couple of different ways that you may be able to get in touch. The first thing that I'd really encourage you to do is to visit the Engineers Academy homepage and register for the sample lessons. This will enable you to engage with the platform in the same way that a student would, and then you'll be able to evaluate for yourself whether you think these resources are going to be appropriate for your learners and for your programs. We also have a Facebook page and the link is given there. Now at the moment probably the best place to connect would be on LinkedIn, and if you search for Andrew Smith Engineers Academy then you'll find me. And finally, if you have any immediate questions you can email me on andy@engineers.academy. So I'm really interested in any questions and feedback you may have, particularly if you're interested in some of the collaboration opportunities that we spoke about earlier in the video. Anyway, thanks for listening and I hope to speak to you soon.